Guest on stage, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, wasn't there to stir drama. He was invited to discuss African independence and America's role in West Africa. Across from him sat Caroline Levy, a former political spokesperson known for her sharp tongue. The producers had planned a calm, civilized discussion, but when Captain Traoré calmly explained his country's perspective on Western involvement in African affairs, Caroline leaned forward, pointed a finger at him, and snapped, "Sit down, boy." The studio went dead silent. The host's jaw dropped and viewers gasped. Social media exploded, but no one expected what happened next. Instead of reacting with anger, Captain Traoré simply stood up with the quiet strength of someone who had experienced real struggle. He spoke softly, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had led his country through turmoil. "I come from a place where boys are forced to become men before they learn to dream," he said, his words cutting through the silence. He continued, turning to face Caroline. "You may call me boy on your stage, but where I come from, boys carry nations on their backs." The studio grew still as Captain Traoré spoke of the struggles he had faced. The loss of his father, buried under an open sky. No cameras, just the sound of his mother's grief. "So when you say sit down, boy, do you mean the boy who watched his village burn? The boy who studied under candlelight because the lights never came back on after colonialism left?" The audience was frozen, hanging on every word. Caroline's confidence drained as she realized she was not facing a politician she could humiliate. She was face to face with someone who had lived through unimaginable hardship. As the room continued to absorb Captain Traoré's words, one of the other panelists, a decorated U.S. veteran, stood up and placed his hand over his heart. "He's right," the veteran said. "That's not debate. That's humiliation." He walked over to Captain Traoré and extended his hand. The two men shook hands as the room erupted into applause. Not out of pity, but out of respect. Caroline tried to recover, her desperation evident. "Are we seriously pretending he's a saint now?" she snapped, but the room recoiled. Captain Traoré remained calm, his voice steady. "It's not about sainthood," he said. "It's about humanity." Then something even more unexpected happened. A young black student stood up and said, "You apologize for being cruel." The room gasped, and Caroline's arrogance unraveled before everyone's eyes. Captain Traoré, unshaken, responded, "Disagreement is healthy, but disrespect kills the conversation." As the room's energy shifted, the host asked Captain Traoré if there was anything he wanted to say to the American people, watching from their living rooms, bus stops, and offices across the nation. This was the moment when many expected Captain Traoré to deliver a soundbite, to capitalize on the emotional high of the moment. But instead, he spoke with a quiet strength that carried more weight than any headline ever could. "You don't need to know where Burkina Faso is to understand dignity," he said, his eyes steady and unyielding. "You just have to know what it feels like to be invisible." The words hit hard and the room went silent again. It was the kind of silence that comes when a person speaks the truth that everyone has been avoiding. The kind of silence that makes you question your own actions and assumptions. Captain Traoré wasn't just speaking to the people in the studio. He was speaking to every American who had ever felt overlooked, ignored, or dismissed. He was speaking to anyone who had ever been invisible in the eyes of those who held power. And then, something remarkable happened. Before the broadcast ended, an elderly black woman sitting in the third row stood up. Her voice was soft, but her words were heavy with the pain of experience. "I didn't come here to speak," she said, her hands trembling slightly, "but I need to say this." She looked directly at Captain Traoré, her voice breaking as she continued. "My son served in Afghanistan. He came back in a box. He was called a boy too, even in uniform." The room held its breath. Her words were a painful reminder of the systemic disrespect that so many people, especially people of color, have faced in America for centuries. The camera zoomed in on Captain Traoré, who nodded slowly, a quiet acknowledgement of her pain and her loss. "When you spoke," she continued, tears streaming down her face, "it felt like my son stood up again." The room was still. There was no applause, no clapping, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when a moment of profound truth is shared. One that resonates so deeply that it transcends any political agenda or media spectacle. Caroline, who had thought this moment would make her a hero, now sat frozen. She had become the villain of the story. Her words reduced to nothing in the face of the truth that Captain Traoré had spoken. Her arrogance had been laid bare for the world to see. And as the audience stood in reverence, clapping not just for Captain Traoré, but for the dignity